Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending upon where you have joined from. Welcome to another webinar by Data Platform Geeks. Our webinar today is on top 13 best security practices for Azure, and our speaker for today's session is Radu Vunvulea, who's the Data Platform MVP from Romania. My name is Aarti Nambia, and I'll be your host for the next few minutes, and Sonal Bhatkar is helping me with the moderation. So before moving on with the webinar, I have a couple of slides. We represent Data Platform Geeks and SQL Server Geeks, which are two different communities founded by Amit Bansal. So log into Data Platform Geeks to know more about our upcoming events and webinars. You can also get access to all the webinar recordings, resources, magazines, blogs, etc. And in SQL Server Geeks, you will find lots of technical videos and technical blogs. So once in a year, we do this annual learning event called as Data Platform Summit in Bangalore, India. So as I was talking about the learning event called Data Platform Summit, this is the 6th year that we'll be conducting this conference. We'll be announcing the dates in few weeks. So on the right side of the screen, you can find the themes for past 5 years. Here's a group picture taken at DPS 2019, which we had organized in the month of August in Bangalore. So we had more than 1,000 attendees who had participated in this conference and who had traveled from 16 different countries. There were more than 100 sessions which were delivered by more than 60 speakers who had again traveled from 20 different countries. So if you're a person who works on data analytics or AI related technologies, this is a must attend summit for you all. Here in this conference, you get to network and learn from the product makers, MVPs, Microsoft certified masters, industry veterans, and your peers from different industries all over the world. So the links are given in the chat window. A big thanks to our core team members who spend their time apart from their busy schedules and they contribute to the community. Amit Bansal, who's the founder and president, Manohar Punna, the vice president, and other team members who represent Data Platform Geeks from different cities. Apart from the DPG core team, we have the eDominant teams who help us with organizing and managing the events. Special thanks to Microsoft for helping us with all our community initiatives. Our knowledge partner for today's webinar is SQL Maestros. You can visit their website sqlmaestros.com to know more about their offerings like hands-on labs and video courses. Very soon we'll be launching video courses on SQL Server performance tuning and T-SQL querying and programming. We'll be announcing the dates shortly. So you're all members of Data Platform Geeks. Remain as a member and you'll be notified on all our in-person events happening in various cities in India and also webinars. So you'll get access to lots of free videos, labs, magazines, etc. Once in a while, we do put up free hands-on labs to the community. So kindly whitelist DPG domain and add events at dataplatformgeeks.com to your address book, so you don't miss out any of our updates. So beyond this webinar, if there are any questions, you can join our social channels. You can post your queries there and we'll pass it on to the speaker or someone else from the community will answer them. So bit.ly/DPG social is the link where you get access to all the links of our Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter and Telegram channels. So you can follow us or join us as per your preferred social network so that you remain connected and notified. You can also suggest us on what tracks or sessions you would like to attend sessions on. So without any further delay, let me hand it over to the speaker. Radu, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. So let's start first of all by sharing my screen. Okay, now you should see my screen, and everything should be fine. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Radu.
So you see the orange part, big
yeah.
orange. Okay, perfect. So let's start. For the next 50 minutes, we'll talk about the fundamentals, security concepts, but things will be a little bit different. I will not focus on the classical ones. Are more related from the data protection, data storage, and how to share resources from different locations that you have available inside Microsoft Azure. If you hear strange noise in the background, sorry for this. I'm working from home, because of the current context that we have globally, and also my kids are on another floor. So sorry for any noise that you could hear in the background. So let's start. I will start with this code of Camille Gibran that said, if you reveal your secrets to the wine, you should not be blamed the wine for the revealing them to the trees. So what does this mean in our context? Is that if you don't keep your keys locked enough, or you're sharing them with everybody, you should expect eventually that somebody that is not authorized to access your content or to end up somewhere on a public web server from the great part of the internet. Let's take a look on the future and see how the future might look like. So it is expected that, and we know that 80% of the security breaches involve private credentials. This means that in one way or another, somebody shared their access, or their security keys were not secure enough, and they had too much access to different storages, repositories, and so on. And also, almost 60% of the database are not encrypted. And why this is important is, even if you would say, well, I have a strong password, or I have strong passwords. I remember at the last Microsoft TechEd that took place, I think, in Chicago a few years ago. I joined a session, a security session that lasts for 90 minutes, where they showed to us how you can crack and access a SQL backup, even if you don't know the password and things like that. So the key was to not have the database encrypted, and from then on, you can find the tools on the market that can identify the location where the hash of the password is stored, to do the reverse engineering, and after that, in the end, to be able to put the backup in one of your SQL instances, and from there to access the data and play around with them. Then the third thing that I would like to mention is that 25% of organizations have cryptographic activity within their environment, cryptojacking, sorry. What does this mean? This doesn't mean that the servers themselves might be involved in this kind of activity. It could be employees' devices and things like that. But in the end, if you are now in the office and you look around and you see 4 people, one of you could be already involved in this kind of cryptojacking activities without even knowing about it. Because usually not too many organizations are sharing, and if they are isolated, well, they don't provide too much information about it. And now let's go a little bit forward and let's take a look what happened in the past. And there's an interesting case that happened to Vim a few years ago. Well, what happened? Well, somebody on the internet and found on a public web endpoint from AWS a storage that was public available. Nothing odd to that, right? Well, once he accessed and downloaded the context, he realized that it was a backup of a database stored in AWS S3 of 200 gigabytes, where you could find a lot of information related to the customers, email addresses, and so on. In around 3 or 4 hours, Vim was contacted about it, and they locked down the account. But still, there were some download activities that happened through that AWS S3 storage accounts. The second problem was not that the endpoint was public, but also the password was not encrypted. So for the person or for the people that download the context, they could very easily hack the database and see the content that was stored over there. So it's like in the airplane accident where usually only one fault will not trigger a crash of an airplane, of hacking of system. But there are multiple things that happen in the past, or the things that we didn't take into consideration, that in the end ends with something like that. Because we are aware of store three different things that could be done better in this case. For example, to not make backup storage public available on the internet. The second thing would be to encrypt the backups themselves. The third thing could be even the S3 to be part on an internal network that cannot be made publicly directly, maybe through other gateways and so on, but you might never want to do something like this. So this is a real story and help us to understand a little bit better how easily, if we don't take the right measure, we can end up with our database or our storage, not half, but let's say public available more or less. Now, the agenda or the topic that I would like to cover are the following. I would like to talk and a part of the session to focus on the secrets and how we manage the secrets, the certifications, and so on. After that, we'll talk about the storage itself, about Azure storage. After that, we'll talk a little bit about configuration, because usually in application configuration, and when we share configuration with others, we are forgetting that sometimes we are putting there full admin credentials or connection strings that could be used by anybody that will have access to that configuration. And in the end, we'll cover a little bit about some SQL features and SQL Azure features that can improve our security level. And in the end, depending on how much time we will have, I'd like to focus about Azure Security Center, because I think that this is one of the tools that is almost for free and can improve a lot the way how we do the audit, the security audit of our Azure subscriptions, and the way how we manage and take different actions. So let's start with the first thing. And I'm more than sure that you are aware of, in the moment when you decide to use a cloud provider, the responsibility between the cloud provider and us, it is a shared responsibility. Usually the physical asset, the data center operation part, and the infrastructure itself is fully managed and is on the cloud provider side. But also, this doesn't mean that we are not responsible for the data, for the application, for the workloads, for the way how we configure APIs, public endpoints, and so on. And this is a very common example that I've seen, is that when you're talking with a customer about a migration or a lift and shift from on-prem to cloud, they are pretty positive, something like that. Well, cloud is already secure. I don't need to do anything about it. I just need to put my content. And this is wrong, because it is the same activities that you need to take on-prem, the same thing you will need to do inside the Azure. A part of them might be already done, or it will be with only one click distance, but still you need to be aware of that and you need to configure that. One of the most simple examples, for example, Azure Storage Encryption. Now by default it's active, but if you are not aware of, or you have all the storage accounts, it might not be active, and you could say, well, everything is encrypted at the storage level. Well, it's not if you don't activate and if you are not aware of it. Now, when we're talking about security and cloud security, there are multiple layers, and just a few of them are the networking, operation, monitoring, cloud platform themselves, and after that we have application. Another application, we have the storage data from YAM, together with the API and CI/CD and automation. Most of the topics that we'll cover today are from the orange side, so API, application, storage data, and so on. We'll not cover too much about the networking operation layer, because I think that we need more than 1 hour to cover all of them. The specific topics that I covered, I found them very common in the teams that I work or I've been involved in the last 10 years. And I found them very, very relevant because just doing simple things, as we will see in the next few minutes, you can change a lot how secure your data and your application is. And my biggest concern usually is related to the secret management. And why? Because I don't see too often people doing the secret management in the right way. And when I'm saying secret management, I'm thinking about not only access keys, use passwords of machines, database, and so on, also the connection string themselves. Because it's so common to share a connection string to somebody that needs only to do the read operation or to only access one database from the server, and you're providing him full access, read and writes, or you even provide full access to that SQL instance, not only to that database. And usually these kind of connection strings and secrets, guess where is the most common way where they end up? It is in the configuration. It can be configuration files, it can be configuration repository, but in the end, they are, in general, most of the cases, they're just configuration files where all the teams from all the phases of development and delivering part have full access to them. And it's so easily to have a system like a laptop that has a virus or a malware that start to extract the data, or even maybe you're losing your computer and somebody is able to access your hard disk and to see all this configuration. Now, for secrets management, both Azure and AWS, you will see that I have, during all the presentations, most of the services name are both for Azure and for AWS, but I will focus and I will give all the demos on Azure. Most of the cloud providers like Microsoft Azure provided systems that enable us to do secrets management in a very cheap way, like for Azure Key Vault. That basically is a software as a service where you can just store your connection strings, your certifications, your keys, your secrets, and so on. You can even define policies of their life cycle, who can access, what they can access, and so on, and are very well integrated from the identity access management point of view, especially from the Azure AD and service principle. And what I mean by that, and we'll see a little bit later, that the nice thing is that in the moment when you provide access, it doesn't mean that you need to provide to another service that needs to have access a user and a password. You can just specify from Azure Portal or from PowerShell that one of the services should have access to another service. Like, for example, Edge Insight should have access to storage or to SQL, to Azure SQL or to Azure Cosmos DB, and so on. And that's pretty nice. In some situation, you end up in cases where a shared key vault is not enough. And the second option is using Azure dedicated HSM that are a little bit more expensive. But the advantage is that behind the scene, you have a physical HSM that is fully dedicated to you, that you can manage it from the operation point of view, not from the infrastructure point of view, but you know that there are no other customers that are storing their secrets on that system. Also, when I provided the initial example, you saw that we have connection strings, certification, keys, and secrets. And what is here important to mention is that connection strings are just another type of secrets, but I usually prefer to give this full example because it's more simple for people to rely and to connect with a connection strings from the concept point of view than with keys and secrets. One more thing here, what is the difference between keys and secrets? When you're managing keys, think about a key is that the key that is used to do the encryption of a storage or of a SQL or maybe of some rows that you're storing inside Azure SQL. The keys themselves are in different formats and can be fully managed by Microsoft, and they can automatically generate the keys for you, or you can do this by yourself, but it's a little bit more complicated. The secret is usually all the keys value items that you have in a configuration file. Can be connection string, can be maybe a token that will provide you access to specific resources, and so on. And the third thing are the certificates that we already know what they are. Using Key Vault, we can have a safe location where we can store them. Now, the initial learning curve when you will start to use Key Vault, if you are new on Azure Key Vault, is the local configuration, the development environment to be able to access Key Vaults, to push secrets, to access them, and so on. And why? Because to be able to have this in place fully, you need to do a few steps. One of the steps is to create a service principal that can be done only through the PowerShell. And when you're creating the service principal, you will have the client ID, the client secret, and the tenant ID that are very, very important later on in the process, when you will specify that the service principal should have access to your Key Vault. Basically, that service principal, and you enable that service principal to be able to access the Key Vault. Now, with the client ID, client secret, and the tenant ID, one option when, for example, maybe from code you want to access it or from other applications, one option is to store the client ID and the client secret inside the configuration file. But the biggest problem here, that at the moment when they're putting these secrets in the configuration files, is like you wouldn't use Key Vault, because if somebody would have access to configuration files, they can see the access keys to the Key Vault, and automatically they can access your secrets. Another option that is available is to store the Key Vault secrets, the access secrets, inside the environment variable. So basically, if you're using PowerShell with set X, we will specify the client ID, client secret, the tenant ID, and the Key Vault names. And once you have this configured, you don't need to do too much, because the library themselves will be able automatically to extract all this from the environment variables. So if you are taking a look on my local environment variables, what you will find here with the Azure client ID, client secret, and tenant ID, and the Key Vault names are accessible as environment variable. It might be a little bit safer if you are thinking about that they don't end up in a source repository, but still, if somebody would have access to my machine, he will very easily could see the environment variables and in the end to access them. And this is the biggest problem, because, for example, for local machines, this approach is a pretty bit risky, but usually works for development scenarios and so on. Now, when you're using directly Azure services, you can do things a little bit different. And why? Because you can directly, from one Azure services, to provide access to the Key Vault system without storing this kind of secrets locally. For example, if you have an Azure VM, you will not need to specify client ID, client secret, tenant, and the Key Vault name inside inside the environment variables or locally somewhere on the disk. The same thing is, for example, if you're using Azure functions, you don't need in the configuration to have this part. And how things are happening behind the scenes is through the system and service role management. And what does this mean? And let me show directly on Azure portal. For example, here we have the keyword. And let's say that we have a web app. It's not important what does the application, what the web application does behind the scene. What is important here, that we should have an identity. We can have a system assigned identity or user assigned identity. What is the difference between these two? System assigned identity will exist as long as this instance of app service exists. If I'm deleting this app service, automatically this system assigned identity will automatically remove, and also can be assigned to only one Azure service instance. User assigned identities are going to be different because you can manage them externally outside the service themselves. You can associate to multiple Azure service instances, and when you delete these service instances, the user assigned identity will not be removed automatically. If you work in the past with Azure AD, system assigned and user assigned identity behind the scene have a similar concept and are using basically the service principle. So in this case, I already activated for the system assigned for every demo 2020. And what I will do next, I will just go to my keyword instance. I will try to look for access control, and from there I can specify a role or my service identity that should have access to the keyword. And here in this case, if I'm looking for RV, we'll find here also the RV demo 2020. I can specify what kind of access I want to provide. It can be a reader, a keyboard controller, and so on. Let's say just a reader, and I just need to click save. From this moment on, my web applications have access to the keyword, and all the credential authentication part and things like that is fully managed by Azure and is happening through the system identity that I provided a little bit before. So it's very small, can be done very simple without too much hassle. One more thing that I want to show to you to the keywords. First of all are the secrets. For secret, it's pretty nice that you can define, you can do versioning on secrets and so on. And all the time for each secret or for each key and things like that, you will see that you also have a key identifier. This can be used later on if you want, for example, to access to the API or to referring it directly. The key identifier all the time has the key or the secret name and also the version. Here, for example, the current version is this one. And also you can specify for keys what kind of permission you allow. For example, you want to allow only encryption, decryption, signing, and so on. Let's go back to the secret because I'm much closer to us. For example, in this case, I have a secret called Radu, and I have two versions, an older one and a new one. And the current version, for example, if you want to see the secret is my family name. You can specify for how long it is active and so on. What is important here to remember is that even if I have a current version and the older version, if somebody knows the older version ID, F0, E, and so on, he will be able also to access the older version as long as it is enabled. Once I disabled it, this means that nobody from that moment in time will be able to access it. If you don't specify a new version, all the time you can access the current version, and it's pretty nice when you specify a new version. Let's say content type not important. You can specify the activation date. So for the example, my local type is 12. I can specify that from from 1:05 p.m. This is the new secret that that will be that will represent the current version. For certifications, there are two things that you can do. You can fully rely on Microsoft to do the certification management, or you can import your own certification from different locations and so on. So we can have multiple certified authority that you can specify at this moment in time. From the provider's point of view, by default are supported DigiCert and GlobalSign, but are the most used provider worldwide. Okay, we talk about secrets, and I know that most of the time, I think around 20 minutes we talk about secrets and secret management, and I think that is one of the keys if you want to build a secure system where we can store our data in a secure way without having any kind of surprises. Now, any kind of application, from any point of view, usually you have configurations, and each area, each component of the system that you're working on would have different configuration, and it's very common to have separate configuration stored even in separate files for each area. For example, API app have one file configuration or repository, backend app another one, ETL part another one, recurring job background jobs another one, and so on. Here the problem with this approach is, first of all, you have a lot of configuration, a lot of secrets in the end that are duplicated, and when something changes, you need to do multiple changes in multiple locations. Also, because in general, multiple teams are working on all these systems. Teams themselves needs to find ways how to synchronize and how to ensure that when, for example, the ETL access keys are changed, they will be able to notify, and also other teams will update their configuration. And in the end, it's pretty hard to maintain, and it's very easily for human errors to appear in this kind of approach. What teams are doing are usually defining a central settings repository where all the configuration from all the components from all the systems and subsystems end up to be stored. Now, on Azure, starting from last year, we have Azure App Configuration. That is a pretty nice service that is allowing us to store the configuration for any service that we are using inside the Azure, or for the most common one. Even if the name is Azure App Configuration, you can store the configuration for Kubernetes, for Azure Function, and so it's not only applicable for app services itself. And you have one central location where you can store all the configuration. Now, you might ask yourself, okay, well, I have this configuration that is stored in one location, but I don't want any subsystem to be able to see all other configurations from other subsystems and so on. And don't worry about it. The nice thing with Apple configuration is that it enables us to specify for each subsystem. We can specify through identities, through different profiles, exactly what are the configurations, what are the information that can be accessed by a module, by a subsystem, and so on. And also, you can configure it very easily through PowerShell or through API or through the SDK. But also, what do they have? They have a pretty nice dashboard where you can play with it. You can specify manually the configuration and so on. So, for example, here I have two different keys. One is storage. and the second one is the last name. And let's create a new key. And why I want to do this? You can create two types of keys. The first one is key value, where basically you have a key name and a value, blah blah blah. Let's say this. So you can specify labels and so on. And basically, the value itself, it is stored inside the app configuration. But you might want to refer secrets that are stored inside Key Vault. And once you are doing the connection between services, as I showed you a little bit before, with the identity and with the identity access management, you can directly specify, you can automatically allow configuration to access the Key Vault. So basically, let's say that we have Key Vault name secret. This is just a random secret. Random secret. We can specify the key vault that we have available, and from there we can specify what is the secret that we want to use. So as you can see here, we have 3 different versions. I will use by default the last one. This means the application, and this is pretty nice. The application, through app configuration, can now access a secret that is stored inside the Key Vault. Also, at the same time, the application, the web app, to be able to access the secrets that are stored inside Key Vault through app configuration, the web app itself needs to have the right access rights for the Key Vault system. Now, going forward on the dependency part, I don't want to say too much, but what I want to remember to all of us, that is very important to not rely or to not assume that any external dependency are already installed and the right version is already exists on our system. And so for any kind of external dependency that we have, we should ensure 3 important things. First of all, that all dependencies are specified. We don't rely that by default a framework or a system will automatically load A, B, and C dependency. We need to specify them completely. And what I mean here completely is that we need to specify exactly the source from where the dependency can be downloaded or fetched and so on. So don't assume that if you give the dependency name, automatically the service will know exactly to go on the right Nugget server for it or anything like that. And the third thing is exactly all the time try to specify the exact version of the dependency that you need to use. And here 2 examples is never assume that the curl exists. Especially on Windows machines, you might be surprised how many machines are without curl installed and configured. And for example, if you use Ruby for this part of dependency management, something like that, you can use with success gem file. It is very powerful and very, very useful. Storage access management. Well, personally, I have usually a problem with storage access management. And why? Because in most of the cases, I see systems that are using this classical connection string, where you provide full access to the storage, to all other services, to all other team members that need to access that storage. And you end up in production with the same thing. You end up in production with 20 systems that are using the Azure storage. And if you take a look on them, you realize that 5 of them usually do only write operation, 50 of them usually only do read operation, and you provide them full access. If some of them are compromised, you don't want to know the person that have your access account key, what he can do on your storage account. So this is why it's very important to rely on 2 different features that are available inside Azure Storage and usually are very simple to configure. The first one is through Azure AD role-based authentications. that, as I already showed for example, in the previous example, are very easily to use. So I have a storage now, but just to make an idea, is the same thing that we talked about authentication and authorization. Sorry, is about the identity part, and basically provide access through Azure AD between two services, or for even an AD user, you can specify what his access rights having that user to that specific storage. And the second thing is through Azure shared access signature, that I think that we don't use them enough. And what I like to Azure shared access signature is two things. One is that you can generate SaaS keys without having to access or to have internet connection, because in the moment when you generate an Azure shared access signature, you are relying all the time on the account, on the primary or secondary account key. And it's very easily in the moment when the shared access signature is compromised, just to reset the account key that was used to generate key. And you can have pretty nice features, like for example, limit the IP ranges that can access through the SaaS access signature. You can specify what are the operations, like read, write, and so on. And the third thing, you can specify the start date and for how long that shared access signature is active. Also, another two things that we should do is to enable all the time the firewall rules, where we can specify exactly the range of RCs that are allowed to access Azure storage, and by default to limit anonymous public access to our storage, because we don't need it, or in the most of the cases we don't need it too much. I will keep the demo because we have 15 minutes more, and I would like to cover the relational database part and also the Azure Security Center. From the relational database point of view, as you already know, we have mechanisms like encryption, and don't forget about database encryption. Don't forget about the backup encryption, not only of the database. By default, you have a firewall where you can specify exactly what are the IPs that shall have access to the SQL database, and also you can define custom rules that you can use to specify who can access what he can do and so on. And also, don't rely all the time for users that you create and you manage inside the SQL database itself. Because it is fully integrated with Azure AD, you can manage fully the access through Azure AD for, let's say, for human users that needs to go to access it through SQL Explorer or in other ways. And if you have a service that needs to access the SQL Azure, then rely on identity and access control, the part that we also showed on the Key Vault and to the app configuration, because in this way you don't manage any secret by yourself to provide access. These are fully managed by Microsoft by themselves, and you don't have too many responsibility and too much risk that could happen behind the scenes. Besides this, and I think 99% of the cases, encryption at transit is very common. I was totally surprised to find out statistically that there are almost 50% of the database and backup that are not encrypted, and I would even challenge you to think and maybe to write on the chat how many of your database are encrypted. So for example, let's say if you have 5, let's say 1 from 5. I'm pretty curious to find out in the end of the session how applicable this issue is also it is in your case, and don't be shy to admit it. Now, what I would like also to cover, and there are two features that are super powerful, are very easily to do, and we are forgetting about them. They are especially applicable in the moment when you have teams that are working during the development phase or during the maintenance and operation phase. And especially during the operation phase, you already have customer data. As we see in this example, we have information like name, phone, number, city, age. Might be under GDPR, but let's say that they are not so sensitive. From the business point of view, salary is very sensitive. And you don't want to allow the team that are doing support to be able to see the salary, but also you might want at the same time to provide them access to the production database to be able to identify what is the root problem. So using column level encryption, you can encrypt specific column for specific roles that access your SQL Azure instance. For example, you can specify that for the salary column, the default value to be the default of the type of the column, or you can specify that you want a random number and so on. And the operation team that will have a specific role that is used to access the SQL table will all the time see 0 here, even if the application, the admins, and other client users that are using the system will see the real figures that are stored there. The second thing is self-level encryption, and this is pretty nice and pretty cool. And what self-level encryption involves is basically to have some specific rows that are not available or are not publicly available for the specific user or role that is accessing your Azure SQL. And how this can be used in a real system is in the following way: you have the production table with real customer data, and you create some rows that are used for testing. The one, for example, for the company name Borse, that is not a real customer, it's just a mockup that is used by the operation team to test the team, maybe to do smoke tests when you are deploying production and so on. And all the systems or the applications that will use and users that will use that role will not be able to see anything else, any other rows except this one. So basically you have a row masking that provide you only a delta view of the table content. From the API point of view, we have the validation, parameter side, and the encode side that we need to be aware of. This is one of the most common things that we should never do inside our code to build and to merge our query itself. All the time we should have it inside the store in the store procedure, because SQL injection can be done very easily in this way. And the biggest challenge usually is how to protect yourself through SQL injection, through XSS and other known hacking mechanisms. And one of the things that you could do, of course, is to use a plugin or an external library in front of your web application. But the second thing that you could do is, when you start to use Azure Application Gateway, to start to use Web App Firewall and WAF. And why? Because they have a pretty nice feature, and by default you can specify, and they can protect you automatically through any kind of OAuth default rules. So this means that any kind of attack, any kind of SQL injection can be detected at the load balancer level and will not end up hitting your web app or your VMs and so on. And through AWS WAF, you can even define custom rules that can be validated in the moment when they hit the load balancer and automatically the web app firewall itself. Oh, one more thing here. Azure Application Gateway together with Web App Firewall are not cheap, are pretty expensive. If I'm not wrong, it's around 600 euros per month. This would be around 750 bucks per month. But usually what is done is usually the same application gateway and web app firewall can be shared by multiple applications, as long as the load is not too high. So basically you can reuse the service for multiple applications, and this way to optimize the code. So we have 8 minutes left, and I'm very happy that I have enough time to cover the Security Center, because I think that Azure Security Center is changing the way how we are doing the audit, in the way how we are ensured that we build a secure system. Because security systems provide us an automatical mechanism that can do security assessment for our services, for our VMs, for our applications, for our data that we are storing inside Microsoft Azure. Now, it is almost impossible to cover all the aspects, especially the application and where we do customization. Basically, we're writing our own code. But until we reach the code itself, we can ensure that from the public endpoint to the location where we store our data or we run our custom code, everything is in place in the right way. And if something is not as we expect, we'll get nice alerts and notifications. Security Center. Okay. One more thing, one important thing that you should know here, especially if, for example, a few of us, let's assume that we are already using Security Center. After the presentation, we go for a few beers and we start to discuss, well, I have 11 points from 585. Somebody else will not have the same points. You might have 800 from 1,000 points, and so on. So this secure score is changing. The maximum value that you can have, depending on how many services, how many instances that you have. Your main purpose shouldn't be to have more points than your colleagues, because depending on the subscriptions, depending on the service that you're using, the score can be higher or lower. What is the most important thing? That your security score to be as close as possible to the maximum one that you can have for the current configuration. When you use Security Center, you can use the same instance of Security Center for multiple instances, not only for one. So in my case, I have I think 6 instances that are using it, and the dashboard is pretty nice, allowing us to see any kind of security issues that we might have. Also, we can see the impact. So, for example, if I would fix, let's say, web application should only be accessible over HTTPS. Also, I have HTTP open. If I would fix this, I will get 40 points. And what is nice here, that for some of the recommendation, you can automatically just click and specify to Security Center, please fix it. And what he will do behind the scene, he will automatically do the fix for you. Even for Azure VMs, for example, he can automatically push some agent updates, or to configure it in a specific way, or to disable RDP, and so on. And also the colors themselves represent the security level. They are from red to orange to blue and green. And also there's some cases where you will say, okay, I want to see only the high secure one, and only that one I want to tackle, and so on. A second thing that is pretty cool here is the regulatory compliance part. Depending on what kind of industry you are working on, you might be PCI DSS compliant, or ISO 25001 compliant, or SOAP, or Azure CSC compliant. In general, everybody of us should be. And what Security Center can do is can automatically do the audit of them, for example, from the storage point of view, and automatically detect and even to do some recommendations, some fix, if for some of them you don't respect the right one. For example, here in this case, I don't have the secure transfer activated on this one. This means that also HTTP is also allowed. Also, one more thing here, for example, maybe you are more close to ISO 1. For ISO 1, you have specific categories, and the recommendations that you have are following the same category. So you all the time on the A6 category, you know, this Organization of Information Security. This is standard for ISO, and the same thing you will see here. If something changed or something new, a new feature is added, it is automatically also added here, and you will receive a new notification for that one. Remember, Security Center is not free. I think that for the initial 30 days is free of use, or 90 days or something like that. And after that, there's a fee that you need to pay for it. And also, for example, you have the security hygiene that you can have for specific categories like networking, data and storage, compute, and so on. What else with Security Center? It's one more thing is that you can define security alerts, and you can specify that for specific alert you want to receive notifications over the email to a specific email group, or only to a specific person, and so on. And also you can define custom workflows that can take specific actions at the moment in time when you have a new security issue found. And why? Because, for example, you might have other people that have access rights to be able to modify the subscription, add new services, and change them. And through these workflows, you can, for example, enforce that at the moment when something happens, you would like to run a specific logic app that might, for example, fix that issue, for example, enforce VM to have something configured, or only use HTTPS on storage, and so on. So you can also take actions, and these kind of actions can be custom. For example, you can even decide, okay, lock that VM until I take a look on it, or something similar like this one. And for closing, that I want to remember you that if you're using an Azure VM, you don't need to rely fully anymore on the RDP part. If you want to connect to VM, you can do this directly from the browser through the Bastion. So basically from here, you just need to specify the classical username and password that you have on your VM. I hope that I was successful, edit the right username and password, and a new tab in the browser will open with the full RDP connection through your browser to that machine. If you go in a full screen mode, you will be able to see it pretty easily. You can basically do anything you want inside the VM. It's a full RDP connection through a Bastion. And that's pretty nice because the chances to have a man in the middle are lower. And not only this also means that you don't have the RDP port open of your VM, because the Bastion itself is running in the same VNet as your VM and has access to your VM, and through it is established the RDP connection, and now public RDP port or SSU ports are open publicly on the internet. Now, to wrap up, expect that in 2024 to have 90% of the customer on a multi-cloud solution. And because of this, we need to rethink traditional security and the way how we do security, data security, storage security, computation security. And a part of it can be copy-paste, if you can say in this way, or migrated from traditional systems. But a part of this is to be rethinking specific for cloud. So what we can do to support this, it's only one thing, to embrace security cloud features like Azure Security Center and similar services, the service principle and the way how we can provide access between services, try to use or start to use key vault systems and similar things. And it's important here to not remain blocked on a traditional development way, because security in the cloud is very different from on-premise security. Thank you very much for listening to me. This is a good moment if you have any kind of questions to write them on the Q&A tab, and I will try to provide you feedback during the session or after. If you want access to contact me later on, you can do it through Twitter or through LinkedIn, and I also have a blog on Blogspot where I usually have one blog post per week. Thank you very much one more time for listening to me.
Thank you, Radu, for the wonderful webinar. And I request all the attendees to post your questions using the Q&A panel. So meanwhile, let me just go through a couple of slides. A quick word from our knowledge partner, SQL Maestros. So SQL Maestros is coming up with the video courses, SQL Server Performance Tuning and T-SQL Querying and T-SQL Programming. So it is going to be an advanced deep dive video course where you can watch anytime, anywhere and as many times as you want. So if you wish to learn more about the upcoming video courses, you can visit sqlmaestros.com or drop an email to contact@sqlmaestros.com. So one of our team members will definitely reply to you. So SQL Maestros has also relaunched its hands-on labs subscription model. So right now, once you purchase the labs, you can own them for life. So we have more than the hands-on labs is a document-based learning where you will be provided with the document with step-by-step observations, procedures, instructions, explanations, screenshots, and scripts. So by the end of each document, you'll be an expert in that particular document. So right now, we have more than 100 labs on technologies related to SQL Server, Azure, Power BI, Analytics, etc. You can go ahead and visit sqlmaestros.com, and there are a couple of free labs available. You can download them and practice them. So with this, we conclude with the webinar today. We have posted a thank you note on our LinkedIn and FB pages. I request you all to leave us some comments or feedback, which will definitely encourage our speakers to come back and deliver even more sessions. Radu, if you can just check out if there's any questions. I think there are some questions.
Yes, I will follow up to them in a few seconds.
Yeah. Okay, can you just read out the question and answer so that even others can get it?
So, can you hear me now, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so the first question was how I can secure the web application, web app hosted with Azure Identity, and how I can implement the security between Azure Cosmos DB and my web app. One option that we have is to secure it through the VNet. basically to ensure that the Cosmos DB is available only through the secure VNet. I'm not 100% sure that at this moment in time, Azure Cosmos DB is already integrated with the feature that is based on service principles that I showed to you. But what you could do, you could provide an AD user that can have access to that Cosmos DB instance, and the app and the web app itself should have access to Cosmos DB.
Okay, I guess there are no more questions. So thank you very much, Radu, for taking out the time. And if there are any other questions beyond the webinar, you can post them in our social channels, and we'll definitely get it to Radu's notice. So thank you all for attending the webinar. Thank you so much, Vunvulea.